Hi, I'm Mr. Klein. I'm your AP government teacher, and I thought I'd use these little videos as an opportunity to go over some of the assignments you guys have been doing. I've been trying to put as many comments as I can on the individual assignments, but there's a couple common things that I'm seeing come up over and over again, and there's a couple pieces of elaboration that I'm not 100% sure if Edgenuity is giving you that I, as an AP government teacher, thought you should have. So I'll use these videos as an opportunity to kind of quickly go over your homework, allow you to, check my answers compared to your answers. The answers you see on the screen here are actually just the keys, but I'll elaborate as I feel necessary. So starting with the first document you guys looked at, the Declaration of Independence is a very important foundational document. There's a reason the College Board included it as a document to be tested on the AP test, but it's also a really important document just in terms of like global history and the history of the Enlightenment. Edgenuity walks you through some of the Enlightenment philosophers to give you an idea of the things that Thomas Jefferson borrows from Enlightenment philosophers for the Declaration, and in some cases straight up rips off. The first question was asking what were Jefferson's primary purposes for writing the Declaration, and one of the key things right up front, a lot of you guys only gave me one possible answer. The question asks for purposes, so you have to take that understanding that it's going to want more than one thing. All of these assignments on Edgenuity that I've been grading, they don't say it directly, but they're all based on the structure of the free response questions on the AP tests. So when they ask for multiple items, like if they ask for plurals in the question and you only provide one on the AP rubric, you're already losing points, possibly all the possible points, simply by not putting enough answers. So always kind of go with the one and a spare tire. If they ask you for one example, give them that one example plus a spare tire. If they ask for two examples, give them those two examples plus a spare tire, and that way you can never go wrong. So right there on question one, that's some kind of skills information. Jefferson obviously wanted to declare independence. That was the primary purpose of the Declaration of Independence. It says so right in the title. But there were a couple secondary goals. The Edgenuity rubric points out that one of the things was that we were trying to attract allies. We wanted to get other countries that were enemies of the British and let them know that there was an opportunity to kind of kick sand in the British's eyes by helping the colonists in their fight against them. Another thing is that this was a way for Jefferson to kind of create a working example of all those Enlightenment ideals that he had been studying. So the very first part of the Declaration explains what governments are supposed to do, why they are created, and what good government is supposed to look like. And then the middle chunk of the Declaration is all the reasons why Britain failed to live up to those expectations, which is why we will be free to declare our independence. So it is a very well-structured argument. He gives you the theory behind independence, and then he gives you the practical reasons for it. In question number two, they're asking you what are the basic rights that can be claimed by all individuals. Those are probably the most famous words Thomas Jefferson ever wrote, that all people are entitled to certain natural rights that cannot be given away, and they are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they're in that order because, one, he's paraphrasing John Locke, whose life, liberty, and property were the general rights that he saw all British subjects having, but also because they kind of work like Russian nesting dolls. You can't have liberty without life. You can't have a pursuit of happiness without liberty. So, life is kind of the root right that all people have. And then they grow from there. So first you're entitled to your life, and then you're entitled to what you do with that life. Then you're entitled to the pursuit of the things you want to do with your life. And Jefferson left out property primarily because property was a touchy subject, in that depending on which colony you were in, there were more strong or weak feelings towards the people who counted as property. We bring up a lot about, especially recently, can you look at a person who did something very inspiring, like writing the Declaration of Independence, which has gone on to inspire not just the American Revolution, but revolutions all around the world. The ideas that Jefferson wrote in the Declaration, he then hands over to French revolutionaries as they're writing their Declaration of Rights and Man during the French Revolution. And the words in the Declaration continue to inspire people to have governments that better represent them to this day. But Thomas Jefferson was also a slave owner, and not just a slave owner. He he indebted himself heavily through extravagance, and his slaves bore the brunt of that. There's lots of historical argument about his relationship with one particular slave, Sally Hemings, and whether or not they were in love or not is kind of irrelevant, because the issue of slavery creates a huge consent problem. Sally Hemings was owned by Thomas Jefferson, so we can never really know if she chose to be in that relationship or not. Thomas Jefferson sold many of his sons and daughters who were born to slaves that he had had romantic entanglements with, and those are all very challenging and dark issues to have with a founding father. But people are complicated, and so we can still appreciate the values and ideals that the Declaration espouses, while recognizing that Thomas Jefferson himself did not live up to them. Into the key ideas and arguments, and these are usually going to be built around the argumentative essay FRQ on the exam, so you do have to pay very particular attention to the wording of the question and the items they're asking for. So the first one was pretty straightforward. According to the second paragraph, where do governments get their power? This is the principle of popular sovereignty. Governments get their power from the people they govern. We enter into a contract to accept our government's rule over us in exchange for certain protections. And if governments fail to live up to those protections, well, then we are free to replace those governments. The second part just asked you for a selection of some of the complaints against King George III. It's an easy section to spot in the Declaration because literally every sentence starts with he, and then he went on to do a bunch of terrible things. So you could have selected any items on this list, and there were also a myriad of other complaints against the king in the Declaration. I want to bring up one point, though. The king's the target of the Declaration because kings are an easy target for tyranny, but most of our complaints were against the Parliament. But it's hard to rally people against Parliament because Parliament isn't one person, it's a sea of faces, and we wanted to be a part of it, so we couldn't really attack Parliament effectively, but you can put the king's faces on all the coins, so it's very easy to target the king and say he is the root of all these problems. So the Declaration is a little bit of a piece of propaganda in that it focuses all the attention on the king. The last question let you have a little bit of fun, and not a single person wrote me an essay on why the colonies were not justified in declaring independence. So you're all good little patriots. You all wrote that the colonists were justified, and really the structure you're looking for is you want a claim statement that says the colonists were justified because, and then X and Y, and then your remaining sentences are examples from the document that prove X and Y. So if you said the king was violating life and liberty, then you could say, he had put military personnel in people's homes, endangered their lives. The king's troops, opened fire on unarmed American citizens in the Boston Massacre. You could say he endangered their economic liberties by making them ship goods with only British couriers, by putting taxes on every transaction. So there were lots of ways that you could then go on to prove it. And some of the issues I saw when I was grading were you would kind of just surmise that the king was bad and he was treating the colonists badly, and that was justification enough. But for an AP class, you're really going to have to give document evidence, especially if they give you the document. If they say, here's the Declaration of Independence, give me specific evidence from it that supports the argument you're making, and then you don't do that, you're not going to get those points. Some of you may have noticed, if I didn't have any critiques to give you, I gave you my own version of why the British may have been justified in not wanting the colonists to be independent. We were a pretty well-off colony, financially and freedom-wise, because we were far enough away to be hard to govern. The English Civil War made it really difficult for Britain to keep a close eye on us, so we had a lot more freedom than normally would be allowed. And it's only after the French and Indian War, when politics in Britain have settled back down and they need to extract more wealth from the colonies, partially to pay for their own Civil War follies and partially to pay for the French and Indian War that the colonists did provoke. We were not innocent in that. that they actually then start to crack down and try to exert control. The issue was we were so used to freedoms by that point that other colonies didn't get, that they felt like major trespasses. So I hope that helps provide some clarity. I hope that clears up any issues you may have had with the grades you received or confusion about the document itself. This will be the first in a series of videos that I'll continue to post on Google Classroom as we go through. Have a good day.